There is a silence that comes with deep snow, a thick, absorbent quiet that swallows sound whole. It is marketed as peaceful, a blanket tucking in the world. But that silence is a liar. It is not an absence of noise. It is a suppression of it. Under that blanket, the world holds its breath, and other things are free to make themselves heard. What happens when the modern world vanishes under a wall of white? When the phone lines go dead, the roads become impassable, and the friendly glow of your neighbor's house is snuffed out by a relentless storm. You are left with the creak of your own home, the pounding of your own heart, and the undeniable, primal knowledge that you are utterly, completely alone. Or are you? This is verified nightmare, where every story is documented, every account is corroborated, and every fear has a paper trail. Tonight, we chronicle 11 cases where the greatest threat was not the freezing temperature or the dwindling supply of food. The true horror came from realizing the storm had not isolated you from danger, it had trapped you with it. These are the 11 most scary, true blizzard survival horror stories. From disappearances in national parks that defy all logic, to the chilling transcripts of final distress calls from mountainsides, to the things that have been documented walking through snowdrifts where nothing living could possibly be, we have compiled the evidence. Each case is supported by police reports, search and rescue manifests, declassified weather service alerts, and first-hand testimony from the few who made it back to tell the tale. The blizzard, in these accounts, is not just a weather event. It is an active participant, a white-walled maze that conceals, a sonic dampener that hides approaching footsteps, and a perfect alibi for forces that do not want to be seen. If you believe in being prepared, in understanding the full spectrum of danger that exists in our world, then you need to hear this. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell, because what you're about to hear will change the way you listen to the winter wind, and make you question what, exactly, might be waiting for you on the other side of the storm. Let us begin. The Whistler of Whiteout Pass. Martin Riggs was a 58-year-old retired forest ranger, a man whose entire career had been built on respect for the wilderness and a steadfast belief in procedure. He lived alone in a sturdy, self-built cabin at the edge of the Whiteout Pass National Forest, a location chosen not for solitude, but for its pristine beauty. His daily routine was a ritual: coffee at 6:15 a.m., a check of the NOAA weather band radio, a meticulous entry in his weather log, and a 2-mile perimeter hike to inspect his game cameras. He was a man of data, of observable facts. The blizzard warning that crackled over the radio on the afternoon of December 11th was, to him, a simple problem to be solved. He had a generator, enough supplies for 3 weeks, and the cabin's logs were chinked tight against the cold. According to his own journal, later recovered by investigators, his primary concern was the well-being of the local deer population. The storm hit with predicted ferocity, a howling gale that erased the world beyond his windows into a swirling gray void. For the first 24 hours, all was normal. Martin read, he listened to the radio. He noted the dropping barometric pressure in his log. The first incident was small, almost laughable. On the second night, as the wind reached a fever pitch, he heard a distinct and new sound woven into the cacophony. A whistle, a clear, 5-note tune repeating. It wasn't the wind whistling through a crack. Martin had already sealed everyone. This was melodic, intentional. He dismissed it as a trick of the storm, an auditory hallucination born of isolation and constant noise. He wrote it off in his journal at 9:37 p.m. Wind playing strange games tonight. Sounded almost like Greensleeves, but it returned the next night, and the next. Always the same 5 notes, always seeming to originate from just outside the eastern wall of the cabin, near the old woodpile. Martin's data-driven mind began to falter. He noted the times. The whistling began precisely at 9:14 p.m. each night, and lasted for exactly 7 minutes. On the 4th night, armed with a high-lumen spotlight, he peered through the reinforced glass of the small window facing the woodpile. He saw only driving snow, but when the whistling ceased, the beam of his light caught a single, clear imprint in the fresh snow directly below the window sill. It was the outline of a bare human foot. The details were stark in the light: the arch, the splayed toes. It pointed towards the forest. No tracks led to it, no tracks led away, as if something had simply appeared there, stood for 7 minutes, and then vanished. The following day, during a brief lull in the snowfall, Martin made a decision that defied his own protocols. He suited up and ventured out to inspect the imprint and check. His nearest game camera, mounted on a pine tree 30 yards into the tree line. The photograph he retrieved, later entered into the county sheriff's evidence log as item #7B, is the first piece of physical verification in this case. The camera's timestamp read 9:20 p.m. from the previous night. It showed a blurred, low-resolution image of the back of Martin's own cabin. The window where he had stood was a bright white square from his spotlight, and standing in the foreground, facing the cabin, was a tall, emaciated figure. Its features were indistinct, lost in the pixelated snow, but its posture was clear, head tilted, as if listening, or perhaps whistling. The figure's feet were bare, buried in the deep snow. Martin's journal entries become fragmented after this. He writes of the whistling starting earlier, now at dusk. He writes of hearing faint, answering whistles from deeper in the forest, different tunes. He notes the generator fuel is being siphoned, though the locks are intact. On the final legible entry, dated December 18th, he writes, "It is not trying to get in. It is waiting for me to come out. It is learning the schedule. The camera by the creek is gone. I see its shadow through the snow, standing at the tree line. It has more than one." The official report states that Martin Riggs was reported missing by his sister after he failed to make a scheduled satellite phone call on December 21st. A search and rescue team reached the cabin after the storm broke on December 23rd. They found the cabin secure, the generator out of fuel. There was no sign of a struggle. Martin's winter coat, boots, and emergency pack were still inside. The front door was unlocked. Leading from the doorstep were a single set of boot prints, identified as Martin's by the tread. They walked purposefully in a straight line from the door, directly into the dense, snow-laden forest. After approximately 100 yards, the prints simply stopped, as if he had been lifted straight up into the air. No other prints, animal or otherwise, were found in the vicinity. The case was closed as an instance of a disoriented individual succumbing to hypothermia and environmental exposure, though the lead investigator's handwritten note on the file's margin reads, "Unresolved Ray, destination of subject, no body recovered." The game camera photo was filed under unidentified wildlife. Martin Riggs has never been found, but backcountry hikers in Whiteout Pass have reported, on still winter nights, hearing a faint, 5-note whistle carried on the wind, and some have returned with photographs of their own campsites, showing tall, blurred figures standing just beyond the firelight, deep in the trees, where the snow remains unbroken. The unplowed road. Eleanor Chen was a pragmatic woman, a 34-year-old civil engineer who trusted systems. Her move to the remote, sprawling township of Hemlock Ridge was for a job overseeing the maintenance of the region's secondary roads. She knew the area's vulnerability to lake-effect snow, and her newly purchased SUV was equipped for it. All-wheel drive, a full tank of gas, a winter survival kit in the trunk. On the evening of February 2nd, despite the escalating snow, she chose to drive home from a late work session. The official Weather Service bulletin, logged at 6:45 p.m., advised against all non-essential travel, but Eleanor knew these roads better than anyone. She had a system. She would take County Route 9, a longer but more reliable route that was always the first to be plowed. Her last text to her partner, sent at 7:02 p.m. read, "Taking Route 9, home by 7:45. Love you." The storm quickly exceeded forecasts. What was a steady snowfall became a whiteout, reducing visibility to mere feet. Eleanor, driving at a crawl, focused on the faint reflective markers lining the road. Then, at a bend in the road she knew had a large, distinctive oak tree, the markers vanished. The plowed surface simply ended, giving way to a smooth, unbroken expanse of snow. Believing she had somehow veered off, Eleanor put the SUV in reverse. Her tires spun. She was stuck. Calling 911, She received only a recorded message about network congestion. Her GPS showed her location as a blank, gray field, approximately 2 miles from where Route 9 should have been. This was the inciting incident. A logical, systematic woman in a capable vehicle, on a road she knew intimately, was now inexplicably lost. She ran the engine for heat in 10-minute intervals to conserve fuel. An hour passed. Then, through the hypnotic swirl of snow, she saw a pair of amber lights approaching from ahead. Relief flooded her. It was a snowplow, its slow, deliberate movement unmistakable. She flashed her high beams. The plow continued its approach, a hulking shadow behind its blazing orange beacon. But as it drew nearer, Eleanor's relief curdled into confusion. The vehicle wasn't clearing the road. Its massive plow blade was raised several feet off the ground. It was simply driving through the deep snow, carving no path. It slowed as it came abreast of her stranded SUV. Eleanor rolled her window down a crack, the freezing air biting her face. The plow's cab was dark, its windows tinted nearly black. No driver was visible. As she watched, the plow's blade began to lower, not to the ground, but to the height of her SUV's hood. It hovered there, motionless, for a full minute. Then, with a hydraulic sigh, it raised back up, and the plow drove on, disappearing into the white void ahead. It left no cleared track behind it. According to her later testimony, Eleanor described a feeling of profound wrongness. The vehicle had no municipal markings, no license plate she could see through the snow. Shaken, she decided to wait for a real plow. Another hour passed. Her fuel was now at a quarter tank. Then, she saw the lights again. This time, they were approaching from behind. The same amber beacons, the same dark cab. It passed her with the same slow deliberation, the blade raised uselessly high. 20 minutes later, it passed again, now from the front. It was making a circuit, a pointless, endless circuit on a road that didn't exist on her GPS, with the driver she never saw. On its fourth pass, something changed. As it drew alongside, the passenger side window of the plow's cab slid down silently. The interior was pitch black. From within that darkness, a hand emerged. It was pale, almost gray, and gestured at her a slow, beckoning wave. Then the window slid up, and the plow continued on. Eleanor Chen's meticulous mind broke. She flooded the engine in a panic, trying to rock the SUV free. It died completely, leaving her in silence and rapidly dropping cold. The next time the amber lights appeared, they stopped directly in front of her vehicle. The plow's engine cut off. In the sudden quiet, broken only by the wind, she heard a new sound, a metallic scraping, like a heavy blade being dragged across asphalt. It was coming from behind her SUV. She turned. In her rearview mirror, she saw a second set of amber lights, a second unmarked plow. She was trapped between them. Eleanor abandoned her system. She grabbed her purse, her phone which now showed no signal and a dying battery, and burst from the driver's side door, plunging into chest-high snow. She stumbled off the road into the tree line, just as the scraping sounds grew deafeningly close. She did not look back. She ran blindly through the woods for what she estimated was 20 minutes before collapsing behind a fallen log. From her hiding place, she witnessed the verification. The two sets of amber lights converged on her SUV. There was no crash. Instead, there was a sustained, grating crush of metal, the shattering of glass being pulverized. The lights then moved away in opposite directions, fading into the storm. When dawn broke and the snow eased to a flurry, Eleanor staggered back to the road. Her SUV was gone, not towed, gone. In its place was a perfectly plowed, clean stretch of asphalt, seamlessly integrated with the rest of the unspoiled snowfall. No tire marks, no debris, no indication a vehicle had ever been there. Eleanor was found wandering down the actual County Route 9 by a county sheriff's deputy at 8:15 a.m. She was treated for severe hypothermia and shock. The official report lists her as the victim of a vehicle theft and extreme weather-related disorientation. Her SUV was never recovered. No towing companies had records for that area. The security camera footage from her office parking lot, showing her departure, was the last confirmed sighting of the vehicle. The deputy who found her noted in his supplemental report that her boots and the lower half of her pants were caked in snow and ice, corroborating her story of having been on foot in deep snow. However, the stretch of road she described her ordeal on, according to township plow logs, had not been touched by any municipal vehicle for over 36 hours due to the storm's severity. The case remains open, but inactive. Eleanor has since moved to a city with no snowfall. She has provided sworn testimony that she will never again drive on a remote road during a storm. To this day, she refuses to look at the amber running lights of utility trucks, and the sound of a diesel engine idling in the cold is enough to send her into a paralyzing state of panic. The road, she insists, was not unplowed. It was being patrolled. The Black Winter of Lonesome Pines. In the isolated, tight-knit community of Lonesome Pines, population 217, winter was less a season and more a shared trial. Everyone knew everyone. Jacob Miller, the 42-year-old owner of the town's only general store and gas station, was the community's unofficial hub. He knew who needed extra medication, who was low on firewood, who hadn't picked up their mail in a few days. The big one, as forecasters called it, hit Lonesome Pines with a fury that severed its single landline phone trunk and collapsed the cell tower 10 miles south. The town was dark, silent, and truly alone. Jacob, running his store on a gasoline generator, became the de facto emergency coordinator. He kept a handwritten ledger, a log of check-ins, resource distribution, and any notable events. The first page is filled with mundane, community-minded entries. Delivered insulin to Mrs. Gable. Helped the Petersons siphon generator fuel. The inciting incident was not dramatic, but it was a clear break in the pattern. On the third night of the blackout, old Henry Wilkes, a reclusive trapper who lived on the northern ridge, stumbled into Jacob's store just before Jacob locked up. Henry was frostbitten and babbling not about the cold, but about the black snow. He claimed that up near the tree line, the snow wasn't white. It was dark, like charcoal ash, and it moved against the wind. It gathered in the lee of his cabin, he said, in shapes that were almost right, but not. Jacob, assuming hypothermia and delirium, gave Henry a warm meal, a cot in the back room, and noted in his log, Henry Wilkes, disoriented, claims to have seen dark drifts. Monitor for frostbite fever, but Henry was not the last. Over the next 48 hours, 3 more people came to the store with similar, disjointed accounts. A child said she saw a shadow snowman in her backyard that melted upward when she blinked. A hunter reported finding a clearing where the snow was jet black and warm to the touch, with no source for the heat. Jacob's log entries grew terser, more concerned. He began to note the times of these reports and the locations. They were all from the northern end of town, creeping slowly southward with each new storm front. The descriptions always involved the snow itself being wrong, its color, its temperature, its behavior. The buildup culminated on the 5th night. The generator powering the town's emergency CB radio, housed in Jacob's store, sputtered and died. In the sudden, profound silence that followed, the radio crackled to life, powered by an unknown source. The voice that came through was a chaotic mosaic of every resident of Lonesome Pines. It was Jacob's own voice saying insulin, layered with Mrs. Gable's cough, the Peterson child's laugh, Henry Wilkes's muttering about black snow. This collage of sound formed a single, slurred sentence. The dark is warmer. Come and see. The transmission repeated every 15 minutes, a haunting, town-wide echo. Paranoia, previously an individual concern, became a collective contagion. People barred their doors, not just against the cold, but against their neighbors, whose voices were now instruments of the phenomenon. Jacob, feeling the weight of his role, made a decision. He armed himself with a shotgun, a digital camera, and a sample jar. He would hike to the coordinates Henry Wilkes had mumbled, the clearing with the warm, black snow. He needed verification, something beyond hysterical testimony. The journey, documented in time-stamped photos recovered from the camera, shows a normal winter landscape gradually becoming monochrome, then negative. The snow lost its reflectivity, becoming a dull, swallowing gray, then a deep, velvety black. The final photograph shows Jacob's boot, not sinking into the black powder, but resting on top of it, as if on a solid surface. The snow in the image has a strange, porous texture, like a hive. The photo's metadata timestamp is to 14 a.m. Jacob Miller never returned to the store. Search parties, organized after the state police finally broke through a week later, found his backpack 2 miles north of town. The sample jar inside was empty, but its interior was coated with the fine, black grit that forensic analysis could not identify. It was carbon-based but structurally anomalous, like graphene arranged at random, according to the lab report. The most chilling piece of evidence was Jacob's ledger. The entries for the final day are perfectly coherent, detailing the distribution of the last of the canned goods. But on the next page, in handwriting that was a shaky forgery of Jacob's own, the log continues. It lists the names of every single resident of Lonesome Pines, one per line. Next to each name is a temperature reading, all between 96.8 and 97.2 degrees Fahrenheit, just below normal human body temperature. At the bottom of the page, in large, desperate letters, it reads, "IT samples. It learns. It is the cold and the warmth. The black snow is the net. We are the fish." The official investigation concluded that Jacob Miller likely succumbed to exposure while disoriented, and that the shared stress event led to a mass hallucinatory episode among the isolated populace. The ledger was dismissed as a community-made artifact of collective hysteria. Lonesome Pines never recovered. Most residents relocated within the year. Those who remained, however, tell researchers from parapsychology institutes, the only people who still ask that the black snow sometimes returns after heavy falls. It gathers in specific spots: the foundation of the old store, Henry Wilkes's collapsed cabin, the playground. And on certain still, cold nights, if you stand near it, you can feel a faint, radiant heat coming from the ground, and hear what sounds like very quiet, very focused static, just beneath your feet. The Black Winter of Lonesome Pines. In the isolated, tight-knit community of Lonesome Pines, population 217, winter was less a season and more a shared trial. Everyone knew everyone. Jacob Miller, the 42-year-old owner of the town's only general store and gas station, was the community's unofficial hub. He knew who needed extra medication, who was low on firewood, who hadn't picked up their mail in a few days. The big one, as forecasters called it, hit Lonesome Pines with a fury that severed its single landline phone trunk and collapsed the cell tower 10 miles south. The town was dark, silent, and truly alone. Jacob, running his store on a gasoline generator, became the de facto emergency coordinator. He kept a handwritten ledger, a log of check-ins, resource distribution, and any notable events. The first page is filled with mundane, community-minded entries. Delivered insulin to Mrs. Gable. Helped the Petersons siphon generator fuel. The inciting incident was not dramatic, but it was a clear break in the pattern. On the third night of the blackout, old Henry Wilkes, a reclusive trapper who lived on the northern ridge, stumbled into Jacob's store just before Jacob locked up. Henry was frostbitten and babbling not about the cold, but about the black snow. He claimed that up near the tree line, the snow wasn't white. It was dark, like charcoal ash, and it moved against the wind. It gathered in the lee of his cabin, he said, in shapes that were almost right, but not. Jacob, assuming hypothermia and delirium, gave Henry a warm meal, a cot in the back room, and noted in his log, Henry Wilkes, disoriented, claims to have seen dark drifts. Monitor for frostbite fever. But Henry was not the last. Over the next 48 hours, 3 more people came to the store with similar, disjointed accounts. A child said she saw a shadow snowman in her backyard that melted upward when she blinked. A hunter reported finding a clearing where the snow was jet black and warm to the touch, with no source for the heat. Jacob's log entries grew terser, more concerned. He began to note the times of these reports and the locations. They were all from the northern end of town, creeping slowly southward with each new storm front. The descriptions always involved the snow itself being wrong, its color, its temperature, its behavior. The buildup culminated on the 5th night. The generator powering the town's emergency CB radio housed in Jacob's store, sputtered and died. In the sudden, profound silence that followed, the radio crackled to life, powered by an unknown source. The voice that came through was a chaotic mosaic of every resident of Lonesome Pines. It was Jacob's own voice saying insulin, layered with Mrs. Gable's cough, the Peterson child's laugh, Henry Wilkes's muttering about black snow. This collage of sound formed a single, slurred sentence. The dark is warmer. Come and see. The transmission repeated every 15 minutes, a haunting, town-wide echo. Paranoia, previously an individual concern, became a collective contagion. People barred their doors, not just against the cold, but against their neighbors, whose voices were now instruments of the phenomenon. Jacob, feeling the weight of his role, made a decision. He armed himself with a shotgun, a digital camera, and a sample jar. He would hike to the coordinates Henry Wilkes had mumbled, the clearing with the warm, black snow. He needed verification, something beyond hysterical testimony. The journey, documented in time-stamped photos recovered from the camera, shows a normal winter landscape gradually becoming monochrome, then negative. The snow lost its reflectivity, becoming a dull, swallowing gray, then a deep, velvety black. The final photograph shows Jacob's boot, not sinking into the black powder, but resting on top of it, as if on a solid surface. The snow in the image has a strange, porous texture, like a hive. The photo's metadata timestamp is 2:14 a.m. Jacob Miller never returned to the store. Search parties, organized after the state police finally broke through a week later, found his backpack 2 miles north of town. The sample jar inside was empty, but its interior was coated with the fine, black grit that forensic analysis could not identify. It was carbon-based but structurally anomalous, like graphene arranged at random, according to the lab report. The most chilling piece of evidence was Jacob's ledger. The entries for the final day are perfectly coherent, detailing the distribution of the last of the canned goods. But on the next page, in handwriting that was a shaky forgery of Jacob's own, the log continues. It lists the names of every single resident of Lonesome Pines, one per line. Next to each name is a temperature reading, all between 96.8 and 97.2 degrees Fahrenheit, just below normal human body temperature. At the bottom of the page, in large, desperate letters, it reads, "IT samples. It learns. It is the cold and the warmth. The black snow is the net. We are the fish." The official investigation concluded that Jacob Miller likely succumbed to exposure while disoriented, and that the shared stress event led to a mass hallucinatory episode among the isolated populace. The ledger was dismissed as a community-made artifact of collective hysteria. Lonesome Pines never recovered. Most residents relocated within the year. Those who remained, however, tell researchers from parapsychology institutes, the only people who still ask that the black snow sometimes returns after heavy falls. It gathers in specific spots: the foundation of the old store, Henry Wilkes's collapsed cabin, the playground. And on certain still, cold nights, if you stand near it, you can feel a faint, radiant heat coming from the ground, and hear what sounds like very quiet, very focused static, just beneath your feet. The frequency. Dr. Arise Thorne was a man of precise habits, a behavioral researcher who had taken a 6-month sabbatical in the remote Alaskan township of Kelsvik to study the effects of prolonged isolation on circadian rhythms. His cabin was a former NOAA weather station, equipped with a powerful shortwave radio for receiving scheduled data bursts and a bank of sensitive audio recording equipment for his work. The approaching storm was of professional interest to him. He meticulously logged the dropping pressure and the increasing quiet as wildlife sought shelter. His only regular human contact was a nightly check-in via satellite text with his university. On the evening the storm sealed him in, his message read, "Subject Arise, Day 87. Storm onset. A perfect natural lab. Will monitor sleep patterns against barometric shifts." The first deviation from the norm was an auditory anomaly. While tuning his shortwave to receive a scheduled data packet, Arise stumbled upon a new frequency. It was not in any of his logs, The signal was a clean, unwavering carrier wave with a faint, rhythmic pulse underneath a slow, steady thump-thump-thump at approximately 68 beats per minute. It was devoid of any voice or code. Intrigued, he noted the frequency and began recording it, assuming it was some distant piece of equipment or a harmonic from a military installation. He labeled the file Unknown Q Storm 1. The pulse was constant, unchanging, through the entire first night of the storm. The inciting incident occurred the following afternoon. During a routine playback of his own voice memos recordings of himself speaking his observations, he heard an interference. In the silent pauses between his sentences, the faint, rhythmic thump was now present on his own local recordings. It was impossible. His recording suite was a shielded, closed system. He isolated the audio, amplified it. The thump-thump-thump was there, embedded in the electronic silence of his own equipment, perfectly synchronized with the signal coming from the radio. It was as if the signal wasn't being received, but was being generated locally, and the radio was merely picking up its own echo from somewhere out in the void. His scientific curiosity turned into a meticulous, creeping dread. He began experimenting. He turned off all power in the cabin, running on an isolated battery pack for his recorder. The pulse was still there in the recordings, slightly fainter, but present. He went outside into the screaming wind, holding a portable recorder. The pulse was there, buried in the white noise of the storm, but now it had changed. It was faster, 72 BPM. He returned inside, his own heart racing at 95 BPM. He played back the outdoor recording and synchronized it with his own EKG readings from a fitness watch. The pulse from the storm was not random. It mirrored his own heart rate, lagging by exactly 10 seconds. The storm, or the signal within it, was echoing him. The buildup was a feverish period of research and deteriorating mental state. Aris became convinced the signal was a form of infrasound or a resonant frequency that was affecting his equipment and potentially his own physiology. He started broadcasting simple sine waves on the frequency, trying to cancel it out. The moment he began broadcasting, the pulse stopped. For 5 minutes, there was glorious, pure silence on the recording. Then, the signal returned, but it had changed. The steady thump had resolved into a pattern. 3 quick pulses, 2 long ones, a perfect repetition of the exact cancellation frequency he had just sent out. It was learning. It was responding. The reveal happened on the 3rd night. Exhausted, Aris had fallen into a fitful sleep at his desk. The audio recorder was still running. The recording, later analyzed by audio forensic experts hired by the university, contains the following sequence. First, the steady, mimicked pulse. Then, the sound of Aris's own slow, snoring breath. A pause. Then, a new sound emerges from the speakers of his shortwave radio, at a volume that wakes him. The recording captures his gasp. The voice says, "Subject Aris. Day 90. Storm persists. A perfect natural lab. Will monitor." It is a grotesque parody of his own nightly check-in messages. It then repeats his earlier spoken observation, heart rate elevated, in his own voice, but stretched and wrong. The final transmitted sentence is, "Isolation protocol is complete. You are the data." Aris's final log entry, handwritten and scrawled across a topographic map, reads, "It is not a signal in the storm. The storm is the signal. The wind is its voice. My equipment is its ears. I have been broadcasting my loneliness, my fear, my vital signs, and it has been compiling a profile. It thinks I am the experiment." He then deliberately destroyed his shortwave radio transmitter with a fire axe, as evidenced by the debris field found later. The aftermath is documented in the search and rescue report. When Aris failed to check in for 96 hours, a team was dispatched. They found the cabin locked from the inside, all equipment non-functional except for the audio recorders, which had run until their batteries died. The final recording is of Aris sitting in silence for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Then, the sound of the cabin door being unlocked and open. A tremendous roar of wind floods the microphone. And then, clearly, the sound of 2 sets of footsteps walking out into the storm. One set is heavy, booted. The other is light, almost indistinct, as if made by something that barely touches the ground. The door is left open. Dr. Arise Thorne was declared missing, presumed dead. The official investigation focused on a psychological break induced by isolation, concluding he wandered into the storm. The audio files were considered compelling but inconclusive, likely the product of self-inflicted electronic manipulation or hoax. However, the university's independent analysis of the final recording noted the second footstep pattern exhibited a stride length and pressure variance inconsistent with known human gait patterns under duress. The case remains a footnote in the study of Arctic hysteria, but to this day, radio operators in the high latitudes sometimes report a strange pulse carrier wave on a forgotten frequency during severe geomagnetic storms. Those who have heard it and made a note of its rhythm swear that if you take your own pulse at the same time, you'll find it is slowly, inexorably sinking to match. The snowplow game. In the working-class suburb of Millwood, the winter of 1994 was legendary for its snowfall. For the children, this meant one thing: the snowplow game. The rules were simple and passed down through generations. When the plows came through at night, piling the snow into massive, mountainous windrows at the ends of driveways and cul-de-sacs, you would wait. After the plow passed your house, you would run outside in your pajamas and boots, climb to the top of the fresh snow mountain, and plant your flag, a glove, a scarf, a small toy. It was a claim of territory, a tiny rebellion against the machinery that undid your daily sledding work. Tommy Finney, aged 9, was a champion of the game. His flag was a ragged, fluorescent orange hunting cap that had belonged to his grandfather. The blizzard that hit on the night of February 17th was a record setter. Tommy watched from his bedroom window as the familiar yellow town plow with the missing tooth on its grill lumbered down his street, its orange lights painting swirling circles in the falling snow. The moment it passed, he tugged on his boots over his footy pajamas and slipped out the back door. The snow was still falling heavily, the plow's taillights already fading into a haze 2 houses down. He scrambled up the freshly piled mountain at the foot of his driveway, stabbed his orange cap onto the peak, and let out a triumphant whisper yell. That's when he saw it. A second set of lights, much slower, much quieter than the town plow. This vehicle was a deep, matte black, absorbing the scant light. It had a plow blade, but it was sleek and sharp, unlike the blunt, utilitarian blade of the town plow. It made almost no engine noise, just a low, electric hum and the shush of its blade cutting snow. It was creeping along, stopping at every house where a child had just planted a flag. At the Carlson house, where Jenny Carlson had planted her pink mitten, the black plow stopped. Its blade lifted, extended with a series of precise hydraulic ticks, and gently, almost tenderly, scooped up the entire snow mountain, mitten and all, depositing it into a dark container on its side. It then smoothed the ground where the pile had been until it was perfectly level, featureless. It did this at the next flag, and the next, methodically working its way toward Tommy's house. This was the inciting incident. A beloved, harmless childhood ritual had been infiltrated by something clinical and predatory. Tommy, frozen atop his snow pile, watched in terror as it cleaned up Jenny's flag, then Billy's action figure. It was collecting them. He tried to slide down to run, but his pajamas caught on the icy crust. The black plow completed its work at the neighbor's house and turned its silent, lightless bulk toward the Finney driveway. The buildup is the memory of a terrified child, later corroborated by an adult Tommy in therapy sessions documented in a court-admissible psychological evaluation. The black plow didn't rush. It crept to a stop at the base of his driveway. Tommy could see no driver through the dark windshield. The blade lifted with those same mechanical ticks, positioning itself not to push the snow, but to scoop, to harvest. Tommy clutched his orange cap, the symbol of his victory, now feeling like a beacon. Then, from a speaker grill on the plow's roof, a voice emerged. It was a distorted, cheerful child's voice, like a corrupted cartoon. The blade began to inch forward, sliding under the base of his snow pile. Tommy did the only thing he could think of. He threw his grandfather's cap as far as he could into the dark backyard. The orange fabric landed with a faint thump in a deep drift. The plow's blade stopped. its front lights flickered off. A single, narrow spotlight mounted near its roof snapped on, piercing the snow, and tracked slowly across the yard until it pinpointed the cap, barely visible. The blade retracted. The plow began to turn, not back into the street, but onto the Finney's lawn, its huge tires leaving deep, perfect tracks. Tommy seized his chance. He half rolled, half fell down the back of the snow pile, sprinted to the house, and scrambled back inside through the basement window. He'd left ajar. He hid under his bed, listening. He heard the low hum in the backyard. He heard the precise hydraulic scoop. Then, silence. The reveal came the next morning. The storm had passed. Tommy's parents, furious he'd gone out in the blizzard, went to retrieve his cap. It was gone. The snow mountain was also gone. In its place was a perfectly rectangular, utterly flat patch of snow, as if the entire pile had been surgically excised. And leading from the street, across their lawn, to that spot and back to the street, were tire tracks. But these were not the chained, chevron-pattern tracks of the town plow. These tracks were smooth, like tank treads, but segmented, and they ended abruptly at the plowed street, as if the vehicle had dissolved. Mr. Finney called the town public works department. The official work log for that night shows only one plow on that route, driver Leo Gable, who reported finishing his run at 1:15 a.m. and returning to the depot. He was interviewed and stated he saw no other vehicles, especially not on anyone's lawn. The aftermath is a collection of small-town rumors and one piece of hard evidence. Over the next week, 4 other children on the street admitted to playing the game that night. All reported seeing the black plow. All had their flags and their snow mountains taken. None had told their parents, fearing punishment for being out so late. The story was dismissed as a shared nightmare or a tall tale. The verification came 10 years later, during a sewer line repair. In the backyard of the old Carlson property, a backhoe unearthed a time capsule of sorts. Buried 6 feet down, perfectly preserved in the cold, clay soil, was a collection of items. A faded pink mitten, a G.I. Joe figure, a small teddy bear, and a fluorescent orange hunting cap. Moldered, but recognizable. All were tangled in a mass of roots and compacted, discolored snow that had never melted. The town chalked it up to a weird groundwater anomaly. Tommy Finney, now an adult, moved away from Millwood and refuses to visit during winter. He still has nightmares about the cheerful, synthetic voice and the single, searching spotlight. And every time he sees a fresh snow pile, he feels not joy, but a cold vacancy, as if something has already been taken from it. The follow-up crew. For the news team of Channel 8, a historic blizzard wasn't a disaster. It was an opportunity. Lead field reporter Sophia Martinez and her cameraman, Ben "Grits" Grimaldi, were a veteran duo, known for their live shots in the heart of the action. Their assignment on the night of the Great Whiteout was to follow the city's plow crews, documenting the heroic effort to keep the metropolis moving. Their live truck, a bulky vehicle topped with a satellite mast, was a fortress on wheels, equipped with 4-wheel drive, tire chains, and enough fuel and provisions to outlast the storm. Sophia's pre-storm stand-up, later included in the station's highlight reel, was confident, "While you're safe at home, these men and women are on the front lines. We'll be with them every inch of the way." The first hours went according to plan. They documented the massive rotary plows clearing the interstate, the spreading of salt and sand. Their live updates were textbook. The inciting incident was a logistical one. At approximately 1:30 a.m., their assigned plow, Unit 12, called it a night. The driver, visibly exhausted, radioed he was returning to the depot. Sophia and Ben, not wanting to lose the narrative, made a decision. They would continue to follow the next active plow they found. They spotted one a few minutes later, its amber beacon strobing through the snow, working its way down a residential street in the old warehouse district. Ben noted it was a different model, older, boxier, and lacked the standard city decals. "Probably a contractor," he said, and they fell in behind it. This plow, however, did not behave like the others. It moved with a slow, deliberate patience, often stopping for minutes at a time in front of specific buildings, a shuttered textile mill, a boarded-up printing house, a condemned apartment complex. It wasn't just clearing the road to the curb. It was meticulously piling snow directly in front of doorways and loading docks, sealing them shut. Sophia, smelling a story, had Ben roll down his window to get a shot. The sound of the plow's engine was wrong, not the deep diesel roar they were used to, but a high-pitched, straining whine, like an overworked pump. The buildup began when they realized they were no longer just following. They were being led. Every time they considered breaking off to return to main roads, the plow would turn down an even narrower, more derelict street, its beacons flashing tantalizingly, as if urging them to keep up. Their GPS began to glitch, showing them on streets that didn't match the crumbling signs outside. Ben checked their signal strength. They had lost the satellite link. They were recording, but not broadcasting. They were now just making a tape. Sophia's professional excitement began to curdle into a sneeze. This feels wrong, Grits. Let's turn around. But turning around proved impossible. The streets they had come down were now choked with fresh, unplowed drifts, as if they had been intentionally closed behind them. Their only option was to continue following the amber beacons. The plow led them to the heart of the industrial district, a maze of chain link and corrugated steel, and stopped in the middle of a wide, empty lot. It then shut off its engine and its lights, vanishing into the near-total darkness. Sophia and Ben sat in their idling truck, the only sound the howling wind and the hum of their own equipment. Then, Ben's camera, still running on battery power, picked up movement in its night vision mode. On the monitor, they saw figures emerging from the surrounding buildings. They were not dressed for the storm. They wore thin work clothes coveralls, warehouse jackets, and they moved stiffly through the knee-deep snow toward the now silent plow. None of them looked at the news truck. They gathered around the plow's cab. The driver's door opened. No interior light came on. The figures began to unload items from the plow's storage compartment, carrying them into the buildings. Long, wrapped bundles. Metal boxes. What looked like industrial drums. Sophia whispered, her reporter's instinct overriding her fear. Are you getting this? This is a drop. Some kind of black market exchange. Ben zoomed in on one of the bundles as a figure stumbled, the fabric coming loose. It was not contraband. It was a human form, frozen stiff, features glazed with ice. The figure hastily rewrapped it and continued inside. The reveal was sudden and violent. A bright, white spotlight from the roof of one of the buildings snapped on, pinning the news truck. The figure stopped, turning in unison toward the light. The silent plow's engine roared back to life, and it began to turn, not to flee, but to position its blade directly toward the truck's driver's side door. The recorded audio captures Sophia's choked command. Go, Ben, go. Ben threw the truck into reverse, spinning them backwards through the snow. He managed to turn them around, crashing through a low drift, and sped back the way they had come. In the rearview monitor, they saw the plow give chase for a block before stopping. The figures did not run. They simply stood and watched, silhouetted in the spotlight. The news truck finally found a cleared arterial road 20 minutes later, their GPS suddenly snapping back to life. The aftermath is a maze of conflicting reports. The raw footage Ben shot was reviewed by the station manager and the local police. The night vision footage was deemed inconclusive and likely a trick of light and shadow on industrial debris. The station, fearing legal repercussions for trespassing in a restricted area during a state of emergency, chose not to air any of the footage from after they lost contact with Unit 12. The official police report states that Sophia and Ben, suffering from fatigue and disorientation, likely witnessed a city-contracted crew engaged in the illegal dumping of storm debris, and their minds concocted the rest under stress. But the verification exists on the unedited master tape, locked in the station's archives. During the panicked retreat, Ben's camera, still pointed out the back window, captured a clear, 3-second shot of the silent plow sitting under the spotlight. Enhanced by the station's own technicians, the image shows the plow's license plate. It was a plate reported stolen from a junkyard 2 years prior, and stenciled in faded paint on the plow's blade, visible only when the light hit it just right, was an old, defunct city logo, one that hadn't been used since the 1970s, when that district was still a thriving hub. Sophia and Ben both took extended leaves from field reporting. Colleagues say Ben refuses to work night shifts during snowstorms, and Sophia has been heard muttering in the editing bay, reviewing other blizzard footage. Watch the plows. Just watch what they do when they think no one is looking. Story 8. The last broadcast of West. Nestled in the rolling hills, the small radio station West, the Heatwave, was a community lifeline. Its overnight host, Gordy McCready, was a local fixture, a man with a voice like gravel and a dedication to keeping his listeners company through the darkest hours. The blizzard of '99 was going to be a marathon broadcast, he'd promised. He had a sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee, and a stack of classic rock LPs in the studio. His engineer, a college kid named Mark, had left at midnight when the roads became impassable, leaving Gordy alone in the two-story transmitter building. His sign-off to Mark, caught on the studio's internal tape, was jovial. "Don't you worry, the show must go on. I've got the ghosts and the machines for company." For the first few hours, it was a typical Gordy show. He took calls from stranded truckers, read school closures, and played long album sides. The inciting incident was a technical glitch. At 2:17 a.m., during the silent groove at the end of Led Zeppelin's No Quarter, a different audio briefly bled through. It was a man's voice, high with panic, screaming, "Get out of the tower, it's in the wires," followed by a burst of deafening atonal feedback. Then, normal programming resumed. Gordy, on air, chuckled nervously. "Whoa, some crossed wires there, folks." Sounded like a bad horror movie. Probably the storm knocking old Farmer Jenkins' ham radio into our feed. But it happened again 20 minutes later. This time, during a weather update, the clear, calm voice of a woman stated, "The temperature on the transmitter mast is rising. It is currently 72 degrees Fahrenheit. This was impossible. The outside temperature was -10. Gordy stopped the music. He called down to the empty engineering booth on the intercom. "Mark, you punk. Are you messing with me from home?" No answer. He then said to his listeners, "All right, something's funky with the board. Gonna run a quick diagnostic. Don't go away." He switched to a long pre-recorded album track and put his mic on mute. The build-up was Gordy's investigation, documented by the studio's always running backup tape. He checked the engineering panel. All meters were normal. He called the telephone company. The lines were dead. He then noticed something on the spectrum analyzer, a device that visualized all signals going in and out. A new, powerful carrier wave was underpinning their FM signal, a frequency he didn't recognize. It pulsed in a slow, complex pattern. He tried to filter it out, but the moment he engaged the filter, the studio lights dimmed, and the pulsing pattern transferred itself to the power lines, visible as a rhythmic flicker in the bulbs. The station wasn't being interfered with. It was being used. Then, the call started. Not on the phone lines, which were dead, but through his own broadcast signal, feeding back into his headphones. The first was the panicked man's voice again, clearer now. "It's using the antenna. It's pulling the signal from the ground up. Can't you hear it singing?" The second was the calm woman. "The studio is now 80 degrees. The snow on the roof is melting." Gordy, now genuinely frightened, went back on air, mic live. His voice, preserved on the tape, is shaky, but trying for bravado. "Hey, Zeet listeners, if you're out there, we're experiencing some severe technical difficulties. I think I might not be alone in this building." The reveal came moments later. The pre-recorded album ended. Instead of the expected silence or the hiss of dead air, new broadcast filled the space. It was a perfect, crystal clear replication of Gordy's own show, but from a different timeline. A confident, smooth-talking Gordy was introducing a song, but the song was one that didn't exist, a piece of music that was all shimmering, discordant static with a melodic, whispering voice underneath. The fake Gordy said that was a warm place in the storm by the listeners. Temperature check. Studio is a cozy 88 degrees. The walls are sweating. Then, the real Gordy's own voice, from earlier in the night, was played back, spliced, and edited. I've got the ghosts. For company, the station's backup power, a diesel generator in the basement, suddenly roared to life of its own accord, though main power was still on. The entire building shuddered. On the backup tape, Gordy can be heard sobbing, then whispering a final, desperate log entry. It's not a ghost. It's a parasite. It's using our signal as a warmth, a beacon. It's feeding on the electricity, the radio waves, the heat, and it's learning to talk by chewing up my voice. The aftermath was discovered 2 days later when the station owner snowmobiled to the building. He found the transmitter still broadcasting, but not west. It was emitting the strange, pulsing carrier wave on every frequency, overpowering everything. Inside, the studio was tropical, over 100 degrees. Condensation dripped from the ceiling. All the equipment was on, screens flashing with gibberish. Gordy McCready was gone. The only sign of him was his coffee thermos, empty, on the console. And on his chair, perfectly dry in the humid room, was a puddle of water in the shape of a seated man, as if he had simply dissolved into the air. The FCC report is a dense, technical document blaming a perfect storm of atmospheric conditions and a freak power surge for causing the transmitter to malfunction and broadcast harmful interference. Gordy was declared a missing person, presumed to have wandered into the storm in a confused state. The verification lies in the listener logs. 11 people who were listening that night, scattered across the county, called the sheriff to report the strange final broadcast. Their descriptions of the fake Gordy and the impossible music are consistent. One trucker, whose CB recording was submitted as evidence, captured the final moments, the pulsing signal, then a burst of what sounds like 1,000 whispering voices all saying "company" at once, followed by dead air. The West transmitter was never fully repaired. It was torn down, but locals say that on certain cold, clear winter nights, if you scan the old FM band, you might still catch a faint, warm pulse, and the distant, distorted echo of a classic rock song, playing forever just beneath the static. The inventory. Maya Santos was a logistics manager for a major retail chain, a master of inventory control whose world was defined by SKU numbers, shipment manifests, and the satisfying click of a handheld scanner confirming that everything was in its right place. Her temporary assignment at the newly built Regional Distribution Center 44, a colossal, fully automated warehouse on the frigid plains, was a career-making opportunity. The Christmas blizzard threatened to strand the skeleton crew of 5, but Maya saw it as a chance to get ahead on the mid-year inventory audit. She had the building schematics, the master inventory database, and a team of 4 security personnel who were essentially warm bodies with little to do. Her first night, sealed in, she announced, "This storm just gave us a week to count every last toothbrush in this building. Let's get precise." The inciting incident was a single, anomalous scan. Maya was conducting a spot check in aisle 117B, high-value electronics. Her scanner beeped over a box labeled for wireless headphones. The screen, however, flashed an error. Item not in database. Location conflict. The box's barcode was valid, but the database claimed the specific pallet location was supposed to contain industrial-grade light bulbs. She assumed a misshipment and opened the box. Inside, nestled in foam, was a child's music box, tarnished silver, with a tiny, frozen ballerina on top. It was not on any manifest. She wound it. It played a slow, off-key rendition of Greensleeves. She logged it as a miscellaneous intrusion and placed it in the lost and found locker. The anomaly repeated, not once, but dozens of times. Over the next 48 hours, as the storm screamed against the million-square-foot building, the team's nightly scanning rounds kept finding items that shouldn't exist, in places that defied the warehouse's own robotic retrieval system. A crate of Victorian-era porcelain dolls in the small appliances section. A box of handwritten, water-damaged love letters from the 1920s. Among the patio furniture, a single, mud-caked hiking boot, left shoe, size 10, on a shelf of flat-screen TVs. Each item was cold to the touch, colder than the ambient 55-degree warehouse air. Maya's clinical mind initially categorized them as a massive, bizarre shipping error, perhaps a contaminated cargo container. But the inventory system disagreed. When she tried to log them, the database would temporarily glitch, the item's description scrolling in a rapid, nonsensical loop before defaulting item not found. The inventory. The buildup was a systematic unraveling of reality. Maya ordered the security team, armed with their own scanners, to conduct a full building sweep, cross-referencing the physical space with the digital map. The discrepancies were not random. They formed a pattern. The intruder items were all located along the warehouse's oldest structural seams, the original foundation lines from its first phase of construction, areas where the building had been expanded. It was as if the warehouse was built on a leak, and these objects were seepage. Then, the security cameras began to capture anomalies during the system's nightly diagnostic, dark hour, when the lights went out for 60 seconds. In the infrared footage, figures could be seen standing motionless in the aisles. Not human figures. Their thermal signatures were inverted cold spots in the shape of people, standing amidst the shelving, holding what appeared to be the phantom items. The footage was time-stamped and saved by the system automatically. The final piece of data came from the warehouse's own environmental controls. Maya noticed the temperature in the sectors with the most intruder items was dropping, several degrees below set points, despite the heating system working overtime. A humidity spike accompanied it. Condensation formed on the metal shelving in aisle 117B, where she'd found the music box. In the beads of moisture, one of the security guards, a former MP named Davies, saw faint reflections that didn't match their surroundings. He described seeing a reflection of a forest, not a warehouse aisle. He took a photo with his phone. The image, later enhanced, shows the blurry reflection of snowy pine trees in the curve of a shelf support. The reveal happened when Maya, desperate for a rational explanation, accessed the land survey maps for the county. Regional Distribution Center 44 was built on a parcel listed as, formerly, unincorporated township of Hearthside, condemned 1958. A footnote referenced a catastrophic reservoir failure that flash froze and buried the small town under a slurry of ice and mud. The town was never excavated. It was simply paved over. The warehouse wasn't experiencing shipping errors. It was sitting on a frozen archive, and the building's own warmth, its electrical currents, and perhaps Maya's relentless scanning her need to identify and categorize was causing a bleed-through. The intruder items were not misplaced inventory. They were memories of a dead town, physically manifesting. Maya shared this with Davies. They decided on one final test, against all protocol. At a.m., during the next dark hour, they went to aisle 117B with a thermal camera and a digital recorder. The lights cut out. In the utter blackness and sudden silence of the idle machines, the thermal screen showed a cluster of inverted humanoid cold spots materializing around them. And then, from the direction of the lost and found locker, a faint, mechanical tinkling began. The music box was playing Greensleeves on its own. The recorder captured Davies's whisper, "Ma'am." The barcodes. Maya, her scanner still in hand, pointed it at one of the cold spots. It beeped. The screen flickered and displayed, not an SKU, but a name, Eleanor Rigby, a date, December 14, 1957, and a line item, lost. The aftermath is a corporate and legal labyrinth. When the roads cleared, Maya and Davies presented their evidence: the photos, the thermal footage, the scanner logs to corporate headquarters and separately to the County Historical Society. The corporation, facing potential liability and unbounded weirdness, fired them both for breaching security protocols and falsifying reports to support a delusional narrative. The warehouse was closed for a systems overhaul. The official story is a massive RFID database corruption event. The verification, however, is held by the Historical Society. They cross-referenced the names and dates that flashed on Maya's scanner during that final hour. Eleanor Rigby was not just a Beatles song. It was the name of a schoolteacher listed as missing in the Hearthside Reservoir disaster. Other fragments matched: a date of a marriage license, a lost dog tag number. The Society's report concludes that while no paranormal activity can be proven, the psychological weight of the location may have influenced the staff. Maya Santos now works as a clerk in a small, ground-level bookstore. She refuses to use a barcode scanner. Davies received an undisclosed settlement from the corporation after a protracted legal battle, the details of which are sealed. The most haunting detail is this. A year after the incident, a collector purchased a lot of assorted vintage items from an online auction of unclaimed warehouse goods. In the lot was a tarnished silver music box. When it arrived, it would not play. He opened it. Inside, where the musical mechanism should have been, was a compacted plug of frozen mud, and a single, small silver button engraved with the initials E.R. The shelter, the community of Silver Pine Estates, was a fortress of modern preparedness. After the crippling blizzards of the previous decade, the Homeowners Association invested in a state-of-the-art, underground communal storm shelter, accessible from every house via a buried, heated tunnel. For retired marine biologist Dr. Helen Carter, 68, it was a selling point. She appreciated robust systems. When the forecast called for a multi-day superstorm, the HOA president sent the all-resident alert. Shelter protocol activated. Proceed via tunnels. Gather in main chamber by 1900 hours. It was orderly, efficient. Helen packed her go bag with her medications, a book, and her late husband's old Marine Band radio, a sentimental habit. The shelter was a reinforced concrete bunker with separate sleeping quarters, a common area, and a secure machine room housing the air scrubbers and backup generators. 37 residents made it in. The atmosphere was initially convivial, a forced camaraderie. The inciting incident was subtle, noticed only by Helen and a few others with trained ears. 6 hours in, the constant, soothing hum of the air circulation system changed. A faint, sub-auditory vibration layered underneath it, a rhythmic pulse that was felt in the teeth more than heard. It coincided with the first generator automatically kicking on. Helen mentioned it to the HOA president, a former engineer named Robert. He checked the machine room, emerged, and announced, "Everything's nominal. Just the storm overhead. It's a big one." But the vibration persisted. Then came the first wave of headaches, reported by nearly a third of the shelter occupants. Then, the temperature fluctuations. The climate control was set to a constant 68 degrees, but cold spots began to develop, particularly near the tunnel entrances and the machine room door. Condensation formed on the concrete walls in intricate, fern-like frost patterns that melted away when directly observed. Robert assured everyone it was a minor pressure imbalance. But Helen, her scientific curiosity piqued, began taking notes. She recorded the times of the headaches, sketched the frost patterns, and used her marine radio to scan for interference. She found it, a powerful, low-frequency transmission that seemed to originate not from above, but from below the shelter's foundation. It pulsed in time with the vibration in the walls. The shelter. The buildup was a slow division of the group. Robert and his adherents clung to the explanation of storm stress and coincidental mechanical glitches. Helen and a growing number of others became increasingly convinced something was wrong with the shelter itself. The tension broke when the lights flickered during the second night. In that moment of darkness, several people, including Helen, reported seeing a faint, bioluminescent blue glow emanating from the seams around the machine room door, a cold, chemical light that faded as the LEDs powered back on. Robert dismissed it as retinal afterimages. Helen's investigation reached a turning point when she accessed the shelter's original blueprints, which she had saved to her tablet. The plans showed the shelter was built to a specific depth, resting on a layer of dense shale. However, a handwritten note from the site supervisor, scanned as a footnote, read, "Encountered unexpected artesian spring activity at 65 feet. Sealed and reinforced. Recommend ongoing moisture monitoring." The shelter wasn't just in the ground. It was corking something. The reveal was catastrophic and swift. A child, playing near a tunnel entrance, started screaming that the wall is breathing. When adults rushed over, they saw it. The concrete at the junction of the wall and floor was visibly flexing, in and out, like a slow, steady respiration. A hairline crack hissed, emitting not air, but a fine, icy mist that smelled of ozone and wet stone. Robert finally opened the machine room door to check the foundation monitors. The sight inside made him stumble back. According to Helen's subsequent testimony, the machine room was no longer a room. The concrete floor had ruptured upward. What protruded was not rock, but a smooth, glassy, black substance, like obsidian. It pulsed with a deep, internal blue light, synchronized with the vibrations. Embedded within this material, like insects in amber, were shapes vaguely humanoid, but elongated, with too many limbs. And the machinery, the generators, the scrubbers, was not broken. It was encased in tendrils of the same black glass, and it was running, not on diesel, but on the pulsating energy of the formation. The shelter wasn't protecting them from the storm. It was a housing built directly onto a living, subterranean entity, and their presence, their heat, their machinery, was agitating it. Panic was immediate. The entity reacted. The pulsing intensified. The vibrations became violent shakes. The air grew bitingly cold. The main lights died, leaving only the emergency strips and the unholy blue glow from the machine room. Robert shouted for everyone to evacuate back through the tunnels to their homes. The aftermath is a confused jumble of lawsuits and geological surveys. All 37 residents made it out, though several suffered injuries from falls in the panicked rush through the tunnels. Once back in their houses, they witnessed the final act. The land above the shelter, a manicured community lawn, collapsed in a perfect, circular sinkhole 40 feet across. The shelter was gone, crushed and swallowed. The official investigation by the State Geological Survey concluded that the shelter had been built over a previously unknown karst sinkhole, and the storm's heavy saturation triggered the collapse. The vibrations were attributed to subsidence, the blue light to electrical shorts. The case was closed as a tragic engineering failure. The verification exists in the raw data. Helen's marine radio recorded the low-frequency transmission up until the moment of collapse. The recording, analyzed by a university astrophysics department as it resembled nothing in terrestrial geology, was described as structured, non-random acoustic pulses bearing a mathematical signature akin to a primitive sonar or seismic echolocation. Furthermore, pre-collapse satellite imagery of Silver Pine Estates, scrutinized after the fact, shows faint, concentric circles of frost-heaved soil in the exact location of the shelter, a pattern that had been growing for years, unnoticed. The whole was dissolved in litigation. Robert moved out of state. Dr. Helen Carter published a private, non-peer-reviewed paper on the incident, which she circulates among fringe research groups. In it, she poses a single, chilling question. We build shelters to protect ourselves from what is above. But what if, in our arrogance, we are merely building convenient housing for what is already below? The sinkhole remains, cordoned off, slowly filling with murky water that never freezes, even in the deepest cold. The searchers. Park Ranger Linnea Core was not a woman given to mysticism. Her world was the sprawling, glacial expanse of the Redwood Sky National Park, and her expertise was search and rescue in alpine conditions. When the storm of the century parked itself over the park, her concern was practical, accounting for the 17 backcountry permits still active. One by one, parties checked in via satellite messenger or were confirmed safe at trailhead cabins. All but one. The Miller family, parents Eric and Claire, and their 12-year-old daughter, Chloe. Their permit was for the remote, beautiful, and notoriously difficult Crystal Basin. Their last check-in, 2 days before the storm hit, was a routine, all is well, ping from their personal locator beacon. Then, silence. Linnea coordinated the search from the park's Emergency Operations Center, a cramped room of topo maps and radio equipment. The storm made air support impossible. They would have to wait. Her frustration was professional. Every hour mattered. The inciting incident came not from the wilderness, but from the technology meant to monitor it. On the second day of the storm, the seismic monitoring array, designed to detect avalanches, registered a series of tiny, rhythmic tremors originating from the heart of Crystal Basin. They were too regular to be geological, pulsing in a steady 1-2-3, 1-2-3 pattern, like footsteps, but of a scale that suggested something impossibly heavy was walking in circles. The park geologist dismissed it as harmonic tremor from ice fracturing under extreme pressure. Linnea filed it away, a nagging data point. When the storm broke, Linnea led the first ground team into Crystal Basin. The scene was one of serene, post-apocalyptic silence. 3 feet of fresh powder covered everything, softening edges, burying the familiar. They found the miller's bright yellow tent easily, pitched in a small grove of pines as the permit stated. It was intact, the entrance zipped shut. The buildup of dread was immediate and professional. There were no footprints leading to or from the tent in the fresh snow. None. It was as if the occupants had never left, or had been removed without disturbing the perimeter. Linnea unzipped the tent. Inside, everything was in perfect order. Sleeping bags were rolled. Backpacks were packed with food and supplies. A deck of cards was laid out in a half-finished game of solitaire on a sleeping pad. Chloe's stuffed rabbit was propped against a pillow. It was a snapshot of a life paused, but it was freezing inside, and the family was gone. Their parkas, boots, gloves, and snowshoes were all lined up neatly by the entrance. They had left in their base layers and socks. In sub-zero temperatures, this was not just unlikely, it was a death sentence delivered in minutes. Linnea's radio call back to base was terse. Tent located. No occupants. No signs of struggle. Prepare for a probable recovery, not a rescue. The mood of the team shifted from hope to grim duty. The search expanded. Linnea, following protocol, looked for any sign of movement. It was then she saw the only anomaly in the pristine snowscape. A single, narrow trail, about 6 inches wide, wound away from the back of the tent grove. It wasn't a footprint. It was a smooth, serpentine groove in the snow, as if a heavy hose or a thick cable had been dragged. It meandered erratically, moving up slopes and down ravines, with no regard for terrain. The team followed it for 2 miles, their disbelief growing. The groove never deepened, never showed any sign of the weight that must have made it. It passed under fallen logs without disturbance, over rocky outcrops without a break. It defied physics. The reveal came at the trail's end. It terminated at the shore of the basin's frozen namesake, Crystal Lake. The ice was covered in snow except for one area. In the center of the lake, a perfect circle of jet black, open water steamed in the cold air. And ringing this hole, in a neat circle on the ice, were 3 piles of clothing. Eric's flannel shirt and jeans, Claire's fleece jacket and hiking pants, Chloe's sweater and leggings. Each pile was folded with a distressing, domestic neatness. Next to Chloe's clothes was her stuffed rabbit, now soaking wet, as if retrieved from the water and placed there to accompany the garments. Linnea's training shattered. This was not exposure. This was a presentation. The team stood in horrified silence. Then, one of the other rangers, a man named Jessup, pointed a trembling finger at the black water. Linnea, look at the hole. The circle of open water was not still. It was slowly rotating, a lazy, clockwise whirlpool. And suspended just beneath the surface, visible in the clear, frigid depths, were 3 pale, shimmering shapes. They were humanoid, but elongated, moving in a slow, synchronized dance around the central vortex. They did not look like bodies. They looked like impressions of bodies, made of light and chilled water. As the team watched, one of the shapes, the smallest, seemed to turn its head upward toward the surface where they stood. The aftermath is a thicket of redacted reports and enforced silence. The official National Park Service incident report lists the Miller family as missing, presumed deceased due to hypothermia and misadventure. The details of the tent's interior, the strange groove, and the scene on the ice are omitted, described only as unusual environmental factors complicating the search. The clothing was collected as evidence but later listed as lost in transit. Linnea and her team were debriefed by officials from an agency she could not clearly identify and made to sign non-disclosure agreements relating to sensitive geological phenomena, The verification lies in the whispers that pass between seasoned backcountry rangers and in one piece of irrefutable physical evidence. Linnea, before being ordered off the scene, used her park-issued camera to document everything. Those photos were confiscated, but she had also taken a single picture with her personal phone, a quick, desperate shot of the black whirlpool from the shore. That image, which she has shown only to a trusted few, does not show dancing lights. It shows, in the dark water, a faint but discernible pattern on the lakebed far below, illuminated by some unseen source, a vast, spiral mosaic of stones, like a labyrinth, that was not on any park survey and superimposed on the water's surface. A reflection that shouldn't be there. The reflection of three figures standing on the ice behind her, looking down into the hole. Her own team was behind the camera. Linnea Kaur took early retirement 6 months later. She moved to a desert state. In a series of anonymous online posts to a forum for retired SAR personnel, under a pseudonym, she wrote the only public account of that day. Her final post reads, "We go into the wild to find the lost. We assume they want to be found. We never consider that the land itself might have other ideas. That some places are not just locations, but appetites. And that a storm isn't always a barrier to a search. Sometimes, it's the perfect camouflage for a harvest." The Crystal Basin Trail remains officially closed, citing unstable ice and recurring avalanche risk. Satellite imagery, however, shows no avalanches in that sector in the years since. But on clear winter mornings, before the sun hits the lake, the ice sometimes forms in a perfect, unfractured spiral, radiating out from the center. We have walked through 11 accounts where the snow was not merely a setting, but a character, an active, intelligent, and often malicious force. From the whistling entity that learned a retired ranger's schedule, to the black plows that patrol roads not found on any map, to the frozen archive of a town that refused to stay buried. The evidence, as documented in police reports, geological surveys, radio transcripts, and sworn testimony, presents a pattern that official conclusions often strain to ignore. The common thread is not merely the presence of extreme cold, but the exploitation of isolation. These stories verify that the true horror of a blizzard is not the temperature drop, but the severing of lines of communication, of escape, of community. It is in that manufactured solitude that other things find space to operate. They use the white noise to mask their sounds, the cold to explain away strange thermal readings, the impassable roads as the perfect alibi for disappearance. Martin Riggs's meticulous logs, Officer Lena Vance's body camera footage, Dr. Arise Thorne's audio recordings, the thermal imaging from the warehouse, these are not the artifacts of panicked minds. They are data points in a disturbing study of phenomena that exist at the edges of our understanding. Phenomena that become bold when the modern world is muted by a blanket of snow. They remind us that verification is not about providing comfort. It is about confronting uncomfortable truths. The truth that there are places, and perhaps intelligences, older than our towns and roads, that view our shelters not as fortresses, but as feeding stations or convenient lids. The truth that some storms might not be random acts of nature, but events with a purpose we cannot fathom. This is why you listen to Verified Nightmare. Not to be scared, but to be prepared. Knowledge is the one tool that does not freeze, does not run out of battery, and cannot be stolen in the night. So, trust the instinct that tells you to look twice at a snowdrift that seems too perfectly formed. Trust the chill that has nothing to do with the air temperature. When the world goes quiet and white, that is when you must listen the hardest and watch the closest. If you value this uncompromising look at the documented realities that lurk in the shadows of our world, your support is critical. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell. By joining this community, you ensure that these investigations continue, that every case is pursued, and every verified nightmare is brought to light. Like this video, it tells the algorithm that there is an audience for truth, for evidence, for stories that dare to look beyond the easy explanation. And comment below. Share your own experiences. Have you ever felt watched during a winter storm? Heard a sound that didn't belong? We investigate every lead, and every account adds to the tapestry of understanding. Remember, the cold is indifferent, but what waits within it is not. This has been verified nightmare. Remember, the most dangerous monsters are often the ones who look just like us. Stay safe.